All right. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. I know it's been a while since I've been on your screens. I know also I promised that Liberty and Friends would only be back at the end, or rather middle of the month. Forgive me for that slight, I hit you with a surprise, didn't I? Didn't expect the show to be back. Guys, welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. My name is Cele Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. It is a Sunday evening at 8 p.m., which means we're about to have a conversation with voices you often will not hear in the mainstream media. Why? Because we provide that solid analysis, compelling analysis, that is, let me finish that sentence, that you'll get nowhere else except here on the Big Daddy Liberty channel. Speaking about the Big Daddy Liberty channel, do me a favor. If you're watching this simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter, guys, hey, there it is. Hit the like button. Do it right now. Hit that like button and help me expand my audience. It definitely helps get the reach of the show out. And don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube in particular, there it is, the subscribe button right there. And make sure you hit that bell notification so that you're notified when any of our shows are up, whether it's the Vuganazo show, Big Daddy Liberty show, or of course, Liberty and Friends. And guys, a reminder, we have a website. Find us, please, at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some financial support towards the channel. We're building something here, guys. We're building something, we're moving. You're going to hear an announcement in this regard in a couple of, no, let me not say that, in a month, perhaps. Indeed, you'll probably also see a change in studio as I move back to Johannesburg. I'll be based there. In fact, at the time of recording this, I'm probably moving as we speak. But nonetheless, enough with the jibber jabber. The show is all about my guests, the Friends panel, if you will. Tonight on Liberty and Friends, we're joined by Flack. He is, of course, I'll call him an independent voice on all things self-defense, gun rights, and indeed a guru on these sort of matters. Tim, brother, good evening.
Hey, how's it, man? How's it going? Thanks for having me on the show.
Brother, very good to have you on the show. It's been a while. And speaking about someone who we haven't seen in a while, he is the head honcho over at Paratus.info. Make sure you check them out, of course, at the end of this. Before I do that, Tim, I know you've started your own podcast. Do you want to just quickly share with the folks what it's called so they can find you and subscribe?
Yeah, it's called Guns Uncensored, and it's basically we're talking about everything that gun related in South Africa and around the world. We're not only focusing on South African matters, we're gonna look at international issues as well. And the very first episode that we put out actually was about the Lady R incident that happened here, where I talked to John Stupart about what possibly went on around the ship. So it was really good. So it's been a good start. Yeah, and we also need to grow the channel.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that link is in the descriptor of the video next to Tim's name, so you can actually check that out and subscribe to his channel. I was, of course, introducing my other guest tonight. He is the head honcho over at Paratus.info. He, too, is a writer, columnist, and host of his own content. Gideon, Joubert. There he is. Gideon, hello.
Evening, Cele, Tim, everyone else watching. It's always a pleasure to be back, and I think we've got a very interesting topic to discuss tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. Let's jump straight into it. And I'll begin with the man perhaps at the center of it all, a one asshat of an individual, as we like to refer to him on the show, as a lot of my viewers also call him the twat in the hat. Here's a chap who, at the beginning of this week, fellas, appearing before Parliament, delivering what is effectively the latest quarterly crime statistics for South Africa. The picture painted by the numbers he released, absolutely frightening. But of course, it's a picture that you and I, ordinary citizens, those of us who are, as I like to call it, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, are very well aware of. A crime picture in this country of us being alone, facing a very violent criminal elite in this country. Tim, I want to begin with you. Tim, here's Cele, who I'm referring to, of course, the Minister of Condolences, or pardon me, the Minister of Police, saying, you know what, these numbers are bad, I know, but there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's definitely a train, and it's a freight train as well. So we're sitting in a pretty bad situation. I've noticed here specifically in Cape Town, I'm very involved with law enforcement and safety and security stuff. It's bad. In one street, for example, in one night, there was 36 cars broken into, and there was no SAP vehicle on duty because the station commander just doesn't do his job, and he's basically pissed off everyone at the station. So all his staff don't want to do the work that they need to. They're booking off sick, and this is a common thing that we're seeing around stations all over South Africa. SAPs are unmotivated and unwilling, or just don't have the equipment to be able to do their job.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to quickly say something here before I come to you, Gideon. On this show, we're actually big supporters of our policemen and women who are at station level. Because I can tell you now, no one dons a police vest in this country, a bulletproof vest, and puts a service pistol on their hip and leaves their house in the early mornings in order to literally go out into the darkness to pursue the wolves, if you will, society's wolves, the criminals, because they just want a salary. These people are very committed to the communities they serve. The problem are the people who manage them and the political leadership in this country, who, as Tim rightly points out, can rightfully create that sense of, you know what, why is this even worth it? Why am I risking my life when I'm getting no support from those who are within my own organization? Gideon, that's the common theme, isn't it? An almost despondency amongst our men and women in blue, and it's not their fault.
Absolutely, and it's been a long-term problem as well. I mean, this hasn't been the case only since yesterday or today. I mean, I still remember 2018, I think it was October 2018, when the then Commissioner, Kekla Sitole, admitted to Parliament that it's impossible for the SAPS to fulfill its constitutional mandate. And by the time he made that admission, I think it's safe to accept that the rot, the dysfunction, the lack of leadership, the toxic work environment that sort of underpins the milieu ambience of the SAPS at that point of time, it has been well established. In fact, we know that that policing in South Africa pretty much collapsed in 2011, just after the 2010 FIFA World Cup, which was in any event an event where it was artificially propped up by a huge amount of funding, motivation, all sorts of stuff like that. And the moment that evaporated, you know, the rotten foundation of it just crumbled completely. And that's where we are today. In fact, a very good friend of mine, a former special, he worked in a special unit in the police in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think about 2018, he said to me, you know, come 2025, there probably will not be a SAPS left in this country. It'll still exist in name. There'll still be people wearing uniforms, but they may, you know, only be capable of certifying your documentation if they have ink, you know, to do that with, which is already a problem. I'm already struggling in some cases to even get documents verified at police stations because they don't have ink. So even that prediction has probably not been pessimistic enough pertaining the state of law enforcement and policing at national level in this country.
Even as you say this, I can feel my frustration building because, you know, guys, there's ordinary South Africans at the end of what we're talking about. Ordinary people who've done nothing wrong other than just have a fundamental God-given expectation and to the right to their own safety, and a state which really should be playing that very role of providing that safety, especially because in this country in particular, we make people run through hurdles in order to enjoy their God-given rights, if you will. We'll come to that conversation insofar as perhaps what people should be looking to do because we're on our own. Guys, let's dive into some of these numbers. And I'm going to use EWN's piece on this particular issue and Times Live just to get some cursory numbers. And I'm going to put some tables on the screen. Let's begin here. As I said, I'll read from EWN. Murder for me is always the first crime stat that has to be spoken of when you talk about crime stats. And of course, predictably, the murder rates are up. We're looking at a roughly 6,000, 6,200 plus number of South Africans who between the period of January and March, that's the period, dear viewer, that we're looking at in this case, 6,289 South Africans murdered in this country. That's 6,000 funerals that we've had in this country over this period. Fellow South Africans, people like you and me. And we were scheduled to have Ian Cameron join us tonight, but he's a bit ill. And in a Jewish sense, let me say refuah shlema to him. I hope he feels better. But Ian would have been very well placed to give us names of people when we talk about these murder statistics, given the work that Action Society, shout out to Action Society, does in communities around the Western Cape. Guys, but let me quickly read from this piece, as I said, because it'll just give a nice context that we'll then speak to in a second. Remember, as I'm doing this, please hit that like button. This is Liberty and Friends in conversation with Gideon, with Gideon Joubert of Paratus.info and Tim Flack, who of course is the host at, remind me, Tim, name of your podcast?
Guns Uncensored.
There we go. I'll do that throughout the evening so that people get used to it and go to that channel and subscribe. Now, let me just open this up. It is on screen. Of course, Cele here, it says, this is from EWN, released the latest quarterly statistics on Tuesday, covering the period, as I mentioned, from the 1st of January to the end of March 2023. The numbers show that total contact crime in South Africa increased by 6,299 cases. It also indicates, and this is where I wanted us to begin, that the murder increased by 206 cases, standing at now 6,289 cases in the reporting period. I'm going to just take this off screen. Tim, I'll begin with you, because the murder stats themselves, the overall number it's one thing to cite it, but I want to look at a table that SAPS put forward of some of the reasons for that drove the murder numbers. And this is where I think for me it got really interesting, as I just quickly do this, do that, and share window. There it is. I do believe it'll be in screen in a second. It's a bit small, see clear. Very nice. All right, here we go. Just look at these numbers, fellas. The breakdown of causative factors in some murders, in some of, okay, that's a grammar error, but in murders in South Africa in 2022-23, mob justice. Look at those numbers, guys. 2,124 cases of mob justice. For me, that number tells the story of a frustration of a South African citizenry who are fed up with SAPS basically being unable to, as Gideon said, meet its mandate. Tim?
Yeah, and people are going to be probably a little bit annoyed with me for saying this, but I've actually got no sympathy for criminals who are being taken out by the public. Their frustration is very real, and I've seen it. I've seen it in areas in Cape Town. Cape Town's particularly bad. The criminals that are here are ruthless. I know in the rest of the country it's bad, but in South Africa, in Cape Town specifically, people are tired of seeing kids getting shot in the streets or coming home from work and being stabbed and mugged, just going home. Just living is dangerous, and I understand the frustration. So we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. And SAPS hasn't got the capacity to be able to investigate these kind of things because they get called out to a mob justice in progress, and by the time they get there, it's a Bravo incident and it's done. And the communities are tight-lipped. No one's going to say who did what.
Now, I was just about to say, sorry, I had myself on mute there. When you talk about mob justice, and Gideon, feel free to come in, guys, as and when you please. I won't necessarily call your names. I know for a fact, and I won't name any names, I myself won't be anybody who names any names, where there have been incidents here in the township I live in of mob justice, where the police are called. And the police themselves, by the way, you've got to understand, mob justice works in both ways. It works, of course, with a community who is angry at that particular suspect at the given time. And, of course, a community who are angry when the cops do arrive, because then they feel as though, well, why arrive now when we're dealing with the problem? And again, I'm not condoning it, and I don't think any of us necessarily are condoning it, but we definitely understand the anger of those communities.
No, no, absolutely. I myself am getting disillusioned and quite angry, and I had to take a break at one stage from helping out with neighborhood watches and that sort of stuff, because I was finding myself getting this very dark anger inside of me, and instead of maybe doing something wrong, I had to step back, and I took about 6 weeks off, and I stayed off the internet and stopped looking at crime stats just gather myself again. I can only imagine how bad it is for the other people in the community.
Now, again, even as I say this, and I just want to quickly remind everybody on the panel, guys, you can come in whenever. I'm not necessarily going to call any names. Gideon, I'm looking at you.
So I think what I'd like to add to that, Cele, is the fact that mob justice is a direct result of the security vacuum that is a product of the SAPS receding from its duties, where the police doesn't perform their tasks. I mean, we can measure it, how badly they're doing. Okay, the best measure for active working policing is an absence of crime. We don't have an absence of crime in South Africa. We have an abundance of crime in South Africa, and it's getting worse every calendar year. In fact, it's getting worse every quarter compared to the previous quarter of the same, at the same time in the previous year. We have pathetic prosecution rates. Murder is under 15%. Rape is under 9%. Trio crimes, which is robbery at residential premises, at non-residential premises, and hijacking is averaged under 3% conviction rate. So you've got two sets of communities. You've got the ones that can afford formal structures, CPFs, neighborhood watches, armed response. You're kind of displacing the cops with these things, and this private policing is kind of taking over those functions, and it's keeping those communities less vulnerable than they otherwise would be. It's still not ideal. You still don't have a proper privatized policing, but you're doing as well as you can with the restrictions on you. In the townships, it's another story. Okay, those guys have CPFs that are often politically captured by little ANC plants, so the CPF is not actually holding the local dysfunctional police station to account. Khayelitsha is a great example of a failed CPF, a failed police station with zero community accountability. They don't have money for armed response. So what do? They resort to the only method of informal community policing they have left. And that often has an element of immediate justice attached to it, which is mob violence. Okay, so the problem with mob violence is it's due to its lack of due process. You can kill innocent people, and that does happen, and that's the downside of it. Obviously, it also, it's called taking the law into your own hands. But here's the reality, right? Our Constitution is a written document. It's in a book. No one reads it. No one gives a hoot about what it says. It's the most irrelevant piece of legislation that exists. Only the justices in the Concourt and some liberal whites and politicians who abuse it give a shit about the Constitution. The lived Constitution that's lived every day in different parts of this country is a very different animal. And the lived Constitution, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how I look at it, is the law being taken into private hands every single day in order to dispense a form of justice. So if people want to complain about mob justice, don't complain about the communities doing this. Complain about the state that's failing at its task, refuses to devolve those functions down to local levels so that the communities can police themselves formally. So it's a twofold problem. One, the state's derelict and neglects its duties as per the written Constitution, and it's being malicious in the fact that it's tight-fisted and it's clinging to that central control of law enforcement and policing and refuses to devolve it. So we can lay the blame squarely at the government's door for this.
One of the funny things for me, as I'm listening to Gideon speak, is, guys, residents of townships are not going to wait. That power vacuum that Gideon is talking about, of the state leaving, effectively absolving itself of its responsibility by way of an inept, inadequate SAPS, is filled by two distinct characters. And I'll speak for my own example here. Living in Umlazi, which is one of the most violent townships in the country, consistently top 10, top 5 actually, in terms of murder and other stuff in the problem. But nonetheless, one of the things I've noticed is happening here. The vacuum left by police is being filled by two particular groupings. Number one is, I like to call them the forums, because they call themselves that. I'm a forum. The forums are basically individuals who said, you know what, To hell with the CPF, to hell with SAPS, to hell with the politicians. There are immediate issues that we can solve by way of creating some semblance of safety, right, against the common Tsotsi, the guy who mugs and rapes or kills you. They don these reflective vests. They first organize themselves into, as the name suggests, forums, and they're from each ward. And these chaps are often young men, the more responsible ones who happen to be unemployed, just to be honest, who say, you know what, we don't have jobs at the moment. Instead of us hanging around on the street corner doing nothing, let's hang around in the street corner actually for a reason, which is to provide safety. So they don reflective vests, they make themselves known to a particular area, so they'll do a door-to-door and say, hi, we are so-and-so. We're just carrying knobkerries, some spears, because we're Zulus. Some of them, maybe the more legal ones, will carry a firearm or two. And these guys will literally man bus stops, corners, common walking paths to protect people who are coming home from work in the evenings in particular, every evening, without fail. It's fantastic to watch them. It's made, for example, my life easier as someone who drives, let's say, late in the evening, coming home. You don't have to worry that there's someone waiting by the gate to maybe hijack you or whatever the case may be, because these guys are patrolling. They're more visible police, if I can call them that, than the actual police. That's the first guys who I've seen step up, if I can call it that, given that vacuum that Gideon speaks of. The others are the taxi guys who quickly realize SAPs are not going to do jack fiddly squats to protect them, either from their own internal fights, which will get violent, or from criminality, because they too are subject to criminals. I mean, if you think about it, a taxi driver is someone who carries cash with them, wags of it every day. So they've formed their own security network with well-branded vehicles, very organized, and ever increasingly, they're becoming a structure. Guys, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, it's encouraging. It's the first time I've heard about the forums that are coming together, like with the guys that are doing all the guarding and stuff like that. I think that's it's a really good initiative. It's something I don't think I've seen here in the Western Cape, and maybe it's an idea that'll catch on. I'm sure soon enough, because we've got groups of people going around to different people's houses and stuff like that. But now you're having to pay protection rackets $1,000 just to park your car outside your own house in places like Philippi and Khayelitsha and stuff like that. So if there's a counter to that, and the community start looking after themselves, it'll be a good thing. I think it's the taxi guys they're always going to. I think there was a new respect for the taxi industry when the riots happened with the Zuma riots.
That's right.
People kind of stepped back and thought, oh, these guys are actually doing their thing. Here in Strand, where I live, the first guys that were at the local shopping malls and stuff like that were the taxi drivers, and they were warning people, if you come in here, you're going to die. And that was the message that was out, and we never had any incidents.
Gideon, even as I want to chime in, because I know you have a very particular take on this, because I also want to be frank, just based on what Tim said. I'm not precluding the fact that there could very well be extortionist behavior in some of the forums. Some of them may be saying, pay me X amount in order to protect you. But so far, I've seen a more voluntary approach where they say, listen, these guys are unemployed. They are genuinely doing this out of their own concern. If you can chip in $50 a month per house, almost an armed response in a way. I know some of them are doing that, but they very well may be extortionist types. Gideon?
So I think these informal structures that are actually, in a way, becoming more formal is where the future is going to lie. Because as the state recedes, as that vacuum is created, vacuums don't last, essentially. Like, something fills them eventually. And it's either criminals or it is some other form of private actor that is organizing a security or safety initiative. And obviously in the leafy suburbs, we have very formal structures to fill the vacuum of state failure. In the townships, maybe less formal, but that doesn't necessarily mean malicious or criminal. I think what people also tend to forget is, when they worry about things like protection rackets, that's a real concern. But if you're living in a township that has an element of high trust in that society between its residents, especially ones that have a very well-established traditional hierarchy, like a more traditional community that has a leader, a headman, a chief, a tribal sort of council, for want of a better word, those communities are even more resilient than ones that are urbanized and maybe a bit more diverse. And I think this is the thing that irritates me about the woke mind virus. Like, all diversity is strength. No, it really isn't. We know that diversity is a weakness, and diversity has got nothing to do with skin color. You can have a township filled with black people only. You can have a township filled with black people from the same tribe. They can all be Xhosa. But because they come from different parts of the Eastern Cape and they have different sort of subsets of cultural norms and sub-tribal norms, these things are not always in harmony and aligned, and therefore you may not have a high trust society, even though everyone in the townships, in theory, on paper, exactly the same. However, where those things can be bridged and you start getting these informal structures, common human decency still exists. Everyone addressing a problem bigger than themselves is still a thing that unites people across boundaries. That's exactly what we saw in the July riots. Is you don't need to say, oh, you know, we're all South Africans coming together for Madiba. That's nonsense. That's forced bullshit. What you can have, though, and say, we're all South Africans, we're spontaneously coming together to deal with an existential threat right now that affects us across racial, societal, and economic boundaries, and fix that issue. And informal structures in the townships, especially ones that are geared towards serving the community, that's probably going to be a big win and a good thing. You're muted, sir.
Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, even as you're saying this, and I'm going to move us on because I'm just mindful of time. It's these categories of crime, as this is where the conversation began, which are more sort of the in-your-face contact crimes, the more violent crimes, if you will, that have seen that sharp uptake, which Cele really tried to explain away as well. You know, we're just not visible enough, he says. And we've got a new strategy, he says, a new strategy that we've just put in place. We're just not seeing those numbers come out as he suggested. And I want to just get into some of this. Just give me a second here, fellas, as I'm doing this. And Tim, I'm going to come to you in a moment because I know you've crunched some of these numbers. You wrote an article in this particular regard. So I'm going to let you guys also chime in on what direction you want to take this conversation. But let me come to rape. A total of 10,512 rape cases were registered during the first 3 months of the year. This, of course, being about a 2.8% increase in these numbers. Sexual assault also, in this case, decreased marginally, or quite a bit actually, in terms of the numbers reported by 14.9%. But let's talk about these numbers, guys. The veracity of them have come under criticism in particular. And I'm opening up the issue of the veracity and the validity and the credibility of these numbers outside of murder, because with murder, it's easy. There's a body. A body's there, someone was killed, it's easy to register it. But these other numbers, Tim, I know you have some questions.
Yeah, look, I've in looking at this crime stats myself, I've picked up some discrepancies where certain things are underreported, and if in the certain section that I looked at, specifically firearms is underreported, I'm almost certain that the sexual assault and rape cases are also underreported. I know for a fact that if a woman's been out to a pub and she's had a couple of drinks and she's a little bit drunk and she ends up getting raped and she goes to the police station, they will make her go home or keep her at the station, tell her not to shower, tell her not to change her clothes, and she's got to wait there until she sobers up before they'll do anything. And if they can find a rape kit, they'll be lucky too. So it's also, I think the stats are underreported, but I also think that there's a lot of people are. Imagine you have to go to a police station to report a rape, and you're told no, you've got to keep your clothes on. And you can't go and shower or anything like that. A lot of people hear about these stories and they think, well, shit, I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's where you get things tying back to your mob justice, because brother or dad hears about what's happened, they know who it was, and then all of a sudden you've got a guy that's being strung by his manhood across the fence, and he's got a nice black necklace and some petrol in it.
Yeah, you're muted again. There we go.
Let me just quickly read something here, and I want you guys to chime in. Even as I'm saying this, there's a particular stat I picked up, and I've just lost it. Completely lost it. Well done, Cele. Excellent hosting tonight. That's what happens when I haven't had an episode of the Liberty and Friends for a while. I want to come back to the murder rate just for a second, because KwaZulu-Natal recorded the most murders at 1,589. That's about a 0.8% increase compared to, of course, with the period last year. And Gauteng came in second. I want to have a chat here for a brief second about the spectre of these hitmen who have become quite a thing in our country's crime mix, if you will. On previous episodes of Vuganazwa, I basically mentioned how South Africa has descended, if you will, into a country basically of hitmen on the one side and mass murderers, actual mass murderers on the other hand. The last case I did of mass murder was in Pietermaritzburg, or just outside of Pietermaritzburg, where 15 armed men stormed a home and proceeded to basically set alight 8 men in that house, killing, I think, 5 of those men. I know more have subsequently died. I think another man died. And there are other cases of this. Guys, a SAPS which simply is not handling this issue of hitmen. Famous case, of course, is AKA.
So, Sisha, just to add some context to that, right? Organized crime in South Africa has a massive impact on murder rate. The assassination and murder industry is a big thing. Now, let's look at where we are. In the past 12 months, if you count the past 4 quarters together, we've had nearly 28,000 murders in SA, right? We are on track for, jeepers, I think 30,000. That puts us at roughly, of a population of just over 60 million, that puts us roughly at a murder rate of 45 homicides, give or take, per 100,000, okay? That is, if Jamaica's homicide rate didn't increase as well, we would be in the number 1 position right now, okay? The only thing that's saving us from that is the fact that the island nation is murdering at a higher rate than us, okay? In comparison, you look across the pond, El Salvador in 2019, Sishle, El Salvador had a homicide rate of nearly 40 murders per 100,000 people. Today, it's less than 8. Okay, it's dropped to a number that is nearly the same as America's. Why? Because their president, their new president, their pro-Bitcoin president, said enough with the gangs and the cartels, enough with the corrupt police. He had a targeted, focused operation specifically deployed to destroy and dismantle the gangs. You have people on the left crying about it because, oh, human rights violations. It's like as if anyone gives a hoot about that, okay? Like, they went from murdering over 4,000 El Salvadorians a year, which to them was a huge homicide rate, to less than 300. In fact, there was recently a case where they went 300 days in El Salvador without a single homicide reported. Why? Because 61,000 gang members are either in prison or dead, because they dismantled that criminal cartel, that industry, that organized crime industry completely. That's exactly the same thing we need in South Africa. If you dismantled the Cape Flats gangs, you said you have one of 2 choices, guys. You're either going to prison or you're going in a grave. You're going to end up in the morgue in a body bag. You have the same treatment with the Zamazamas. You have the same treatment with every organized criminal group in this country, and you just dismantle them one by one by one. Our murder rate will drop to next to nothing.
Yeah. And it's not like we don't know who these gang bosses are. I'm not going to say names here because the last person I know that mentioned names live on TV ended up having a really difficult time for a couple of months. So we know who these guys are. They're in the news all the time. They know where they live. They know where their houses are. I'm not one to condone criminality, but look at what happened when Pagat was quite prevalent in South Africa. And Pagat hasn't disappeared. They're still around. They're just not very out in the open anymore. They got tired of it. They knew who the bad guys were, and look what happened.
As you're saying this, I'm very mindful of the fact that of a recent story we covered here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show, in fact, Wednesday's show, where we had a conversation with investigative journalist Aaron Hyman from the Times Group, Sunday Times Group, and we had a chat about some of these prominent crime bosses, most of the international chaps, who are known. They're known not only to the communities around them, they're known to their various embassies, and they're also known to the South African government. Yet they operate in this country with impunity. Gideon, I'm saying this in the context of the point you made now on why we don't see that same impetus, that same gees, as they say in Afrikaans, of the states basically taking these guys on and saying, you know what, you will be behind bars. If not, you will meet with a bullet to the face from a police officer if you try and resist. Why are we not seeing that I don't know what to call it, that thing, if you will, from the South African Police Service to respond to these criminals? Why are we the ones who live in fear?
The polite answer, there are two answers to this. There's a polite one and there's an impolite one. The polite answer is that we no longer possess the political will to do it, nor do we possess the technical competence and capacity to perform these tasks. What that means, the impolite answer, is that the police are now so corrupt and criminally infiltrated and rotten that you have high-ranking police officers at the top, low-ranking police officers at the bottom, all of them with organized crime connections that are paying them a lucrative amount of money for them to essentially work for these organized criminal groups. You know, I don't think they pay tax on those on that income. They don't get a pay-as-you-earn slip for what they get, but they probably more than double their salaries by just working for criminals and gangsters. I've heard horror stories of entire police stations, station commanders in Cape Town, telling complainants that it's best that they don't open a case against certain construction mafia in cases of intimidation, because every single person that works in their charge office is directly connected to these gangs and will then use the information that guy gives in opening a case to leak it to the criminals to go after him. That's the one side. The other side, so apart from the cops being almost completely criminally captured, or in such a large degree criminally captured that they can no longer perform these tasks, organized criminal gang bosses, whatever you want to call them, have a hell of a lot of top-level political protection, because they and the Tuli House are like that. I mean, Bheki Cele is having tea and cake with, you know, like the taxi mafia. And yeah, I know there's nuance to that, but I mean, if he's having tea and cake with those oaks, he's having tea and cake with every other mafia group in existence.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is, if you've got a government that's essentially a criminal government that's protecting organized criminal groups because in their personal capacity they're benefiting from crime in South Africa, there is no desire to solve violent crime at all. So until we actually confront the fact that the ANC is the biggest mafia in this country and that they are directly responsible for this misery, because none of these problems are difficult to solve. The worst myth is people believing, oh gosh, violent crime is an insurmountable problem. It's really not. It's just not being tackled at all.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was involved in arresting a guy for a Schedule 1 offense. So for those that don't know, a Schedule 1 offense in South Africa, as a citizen, you can arrest someone for committing that. You must just know what the law says and how to back yourself up. I arrested a guy for a Schedule 1 offense. He kidnapped and used a firearm to try and extort money out of the person after a hijacking. I saw this happen in front of me. I arrested the guy, went to the station the next morning to get the CAS number, and as I walked in, I saw one of the biggest prominent gang bosses in South Africa, well, in the Cape area. As I walked in, I looked at him, I recognized him because I've had dealings with him before. He's everywhere. Said, "Oh, don't worry, Sergeant. I know where the Colonel's office is," and he walked straight through to the station commander's office, just like that.
Again. Oh my gosh, sorry, I nearly swore. I mean, this is the extent of this, which I must say this as we sort of wrap up our conversation. It's this kind of stuff, the compromised nature of some of our police stations, that therefore also makes me question the veracity of our numbers for a multitude of reasons. One such area is, Tim, you've actually written an article on this, and I'll put it up on screen in a moment, around the issue of gun violence and how certain political voices can also, aside from the criminality and the captured nature of some police stations, there are also some lobby groupings that can twist the numbers, if you will, on some issues. Tim, I'm going to come to you on this because, again, as I said, you wrote a piece on this. Just give me a moment here to load it up, and I'll let you speak to it because it has a nice little graph attached to it. Just give me a second here, fellas. As I'm doing this, remember you're watching Liberty and Friends. I'm in conversation with Tim Flack, the host of the Tim, hit it?
Guns Uncensored podcast.
There we go. Guns Uncensored podcast. Make sure please you subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button as you watch his content. Help him grow, please, his show. And Gideon Joubert, who of course is the head honcho over Paratus.info. I'll make sure the link to that is in the descriptor of this video. Tim, there it is over there as it loads up. And there's a particular section here that I just highlighted. Before we get to that, let me just show people. The title there is Firearms, Not the Leading Cause of Murder in South Africa. SAPS data reveals. This, of course, is an article, as I mentioned, by Tim Flack, who's joining us in studio. This is the section I wanted to get to the analysis that Tim speaks about. Tim, you mentioned here that the analysis revealed that certain categories of data were omitted from the reporting due to possible uncertainty surrounding the cause of death as determined by SAPS. This discrepancy was consistently observed across all 4 quarters. Consequently, it became evident that firearms were not the leading cause of murder. On the contrary, the majority of murders in South Africa were committed, using means other than firearms. And then you put a graph here. Firstly, how did you determine this, and talk us through this graph?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did was I obviously work in my day-to-day job is public relations, and I work with various firearms lobbies in the country. And the fourth quarter crime stats came up, and I looked at it and saw that the numbers of firearms were sitting at 2,629. And I looked at the other categories, and like most times, I've thought to myself, well, firearms are sitting there at the top, and we're consistently hearing this from those we shall not name, that specific anti-organization. We won't mention AK-47, but it pops up, and they keep saying firearms are the leading cause of murder in this country. Firearms cause the most murder in this country, and I looked at it and I thought to myself, well, we've had a recent development in technology in South Africa and in the world, and that's Chat GPT. And what I did was I took the statistics, I took the whole section on murder, and I took the whole section on the quarter crime stats and the methods of murder used. I plugged that in and I asked it if there was any discrepancies, and it immediately popped up and said that, look, the total amount in the weapons used doesn't add up to the total amount of murders. So then I asked it in each quarter, what is the difference? And the numbers came up, and that's what you're seeing in front of you now. So if you look at the first quarter, firearms is 2,766, and then you've obviously got knives, sharp instruments, blunt instruments, body parts, stones, and bricks. And then there's a section called other means. Now that other means section, that number is not included in the official SAPS presentation. If you take the numbers of firearms, knives, sharp instruments, blunt instruments, body parts, stones, and bricks and rocks, and add that together, the total is not 6,424. But if you add that 1,819, then it makes up the total. So that means in every single quarter, there's a section that is unaccounted for. And it can be due to the fact that SAPS has just found a body on the side of the road. But it seems very strange because these other means in all the quarters, first, second, third, and fourth, in the second quarter, it's 2,283 people were murdered, and they don't know what they were murdered with or how they were murdered. It could be things like poison. It could be a body just found on the side of the road, that sort of stuff. We don't know how they categorize these things, but because they're leaving this out, one could come to the conclusion that firearms are the most used weapon or choice weapon for murder in the country. When in actual fact, if there's another graph that I did where I took the numbers and I labeled it murders with firearms and murders without firearms, you can clearly see murders without firearms in the fourth quarter, 3,660. 4,411 in the third quarter. In the second quarter, 4,196. In the first quarter, 3,656, as opposed to the murder with firearms, which is lower. So firearms are making up, and I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm saying that you can't turn around and say that firearms are the major problem. We have a violence problem in this country, and that needs to be addressed. And that can't be. It's not a band-aid on a bullet hole approach. We can't blame firearms and expect that's going to bring down the murder rate. Firearms are making up to maybe 40% of the murders. The rest, you're more likely to be killed by a knife, in all sense of the word, than being shot by a firearm.
So then I'm going to let you chime in, but as I do that, We're in the last 5 minutes, guys, of the chat. So I'm also going to ask you, after Gideon makes his point, final comments from both of you.
So I think what Tim did there is invaluable in the sense that I don't think the police are necessarily being malicious pertaining to what they omit. Honest to God, think that they are not very good at processing statistics accurately. And my basis for saying that is I've sat through several deaths by PowerPoint presentations given to Parliament by the police. It was atrocious and amateuristic, and that was their best effort. And I mean, if you had to give a presentation like that to a corporate boardroom, they would not ask you to ever come back. And this is what we're dealing with. So I don't think they have the technical capacity or competence to actually process these things properly, which is again where it comes back to where we started this conversation. Are we seeing an accurate violent crime picture in South Africa? And the answer to that is most definitely no, because apart from the underreporting side to it, which we have extensive published information on pertaining the lower public confidence in police and policing, the less likely they are to report crimes, as well as the side that the police are really bad at curating statistics and compiling and putting them together.
Yeah, no,
Tim, final word?
Well, getting the statistics out of them is going to be another difficult one. You're not going to be able to get things from them. Yeah, final word is the next time someone tells you that guns are the leading cause of violence or leading cause of murder in this country, pick up my copy of my article, tape it to a telephone book and smack them over the head and say, there you go, read this. This tells you otherwise. You're more likely to be stabbed, fact, because of the numbers, than be shot by a firearm in this country.
Absolutely. Gideon, final word.
Final words is, guys, we're on our own. Things are not going to improve. It's going to continue getting worse to some sort of point of plateau. We need to embrace the fact that we are the solution as individuals and as communities. So start working on your own resilience. If you feel willing and able to shoulder the responsibility of being legally armed and lethal defensively, then get the process going now of becoming legally armed and then get the training. And if you already have a gun, you can never be trained enough to get training. If that's not your vibe, something that everyone should be doing is get to know your neighbors, get to know your community safety organizations and structures, neighborhood watches, and all these things that are useful, and start making them better and improving them. Because at some point in time, we're all going to have to step into this vacuum of safety and security. Because if we don't do it, the criminals are going to do it, and things are not going to get better if we let that happen.
Absolutely. And again, just on that point that Gideon is making, there we go. That's my attempt at getting armed in this B. Because you know how it is, guys. Gideon is absolutely spot on in saying we are on our own. Tim, I just forgot to give you a chance, brother, to punt, and I'll give you a chance, Gideon, to punt your particular channels and how people can get in contact with you. Tim?
Yeah, well, I own and operate a public relations firm here in Cape Town called Flack Partners PR, and my YouTube channel is called Guns Uncensored. I've got 2 episodes on, so you can see my little logo on the top of the screen there. But check it out on YouTube. The last episode we did was about the Lady R and what went onto the ship and what came off. And I can tell you, it was not guns that we sent over to Russia.
That is an appetite-whetting statement there. Make sure, please, you head over to Tim's channel. Please, guys, subscribe. Please support our work as alternative media in this country. Gideon, homie, how do the folks get in touch with you? What's in the pipeline?
So Paratus.info, that's where you can find me. As to what's in the pipeline, I've been very busy with a couple of private projects. I'm very consumed with independent security consulting at the moment, and I only have a handful of clients, and I look after them. There's interesting things happening in South Africa, guys. I can't tell you about all of them yet, and I'm hoping that the projects come properly to fruition. We've put in a lot of work in them, but possibly very exciting things that's good for everyone. I've also regularly compiled some reports. I haven't published anything on my page yet, but I've got about a backlog of about 5 things. So keep an eye on Paratus.info. There will be some more content on there soon that might be useful to you. And yeah, just remember to invest in personal resilience.
Absolutely. Fellas, thank you very much to the both of you for your time. As I say goodbye to Utim and Gideon there. Guys, thank you for watching. This is another episode of Liberty and Friends. It's perhaps one of the first in a while. I will be back mid-June. I just felt like I needed to do the show because of the important nature of the topic. Let me know what you think about what we discussed here this evening. Are you someone who's heeded the call, and maybe you two are, let me just bring this back here, getting, training yourself? Oh, there it is. Make sure, please, you do that. In my case, I'm doing this through Ihau Firearm Center. Shout out to Ihau, who I will be doing an episode with them on that, charting my journey of becoming a legal gun owner in South Africa. I really strongly encourage you to do that too, because trust me when I say this, you are on your own. Bheki Cele himself has his ineptitude, his asshat nature has shown us that. Here's a guy who, instead of fighting crime, would rather spend 8.2 million rand over the last 3 years to travel around the country and basically flash himself before cameras instead of diverting that money to actual crime fighting. But let me not waffle. Let me know. Drop a comment in the comment section. Leave a like, please. And as I always say, guys, leave a like, whatever medium, you're watching the show on. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube in particular, please subscribe to the show. Guys, you can support the work that we're doing here by finding a payment method that suits you at bigdaddyliberty.com. We're launching something soon, guys. We've also, let me not say anything because, we're working on stuff. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. And as I like to say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.